Hello boys, girls, and bog creatures. I'm Gerphan, and this is the making of for the visuals for You Make Me Ache, the lo-fi visualizer. So let's get to it! Like all things, this started with a brainstorming session by the whole team for a completely different music video. Anyway, the song is so gentle, and it's a lot like a conversation between friends or lovers, and with the progression of the chords, it gave me flashes of the changing of the seasons and how they reflect in our relationships. At this point, after the incredibly animation-heavy, beautiful and every bee music videos, our glorious leader, bless you Candace, wanted to focus on a more lo-fi kind of aesthetic, so we could rest our arthritic little animator wrists. Oh, we love you, Candace. And as you'll soon see, I always push for a paper aesthetic, despite never getting to do it or having done it before. Call me a masochist, but my origins are actually in watercolor and ink, so getting to do this was a real treat. I don't have a lot of footage, the actual painting process of the watercolor, but I do have of the initial sketch. So what I do quite often is I start by photo bashing something together, especially if it's a landscape, because drawing landscapes is it's a pain. And this way you get natural shapes by drawing over them, and it warms you up for drawing those shapes on your own. Because you see, I take liberties with the shape of the leaves, and eventually I get sick of the shape of the tree trunk because I think it is not in any way fun for the shape of the leaves. So I change it. This was me practicing the rendering style and lighting, and you can see this is where I start thinking. Start adding some of the leaves, seeing what it would look like, and switching from a leaf brush to just a simple flat brush to get those shapes and block them out. Yeah, it's a tedious process. And this is where I go into a more organic shape of my own for the tree trunk. It takes shape quite easily because all I do is I work from a single line, and then trees are a lot as above, so below. They follow the general root structure that they would have, and the fun thing about drawing organic things is you can kind of just go with the flow and let your mind wander all around. And this was me following a little bit of a tutorial I found online on lighting, at least like placement of the highlights for a tree like this. Masking out the branches, changing the layer structure so that the branches themselves layer over, like layer under, and then some of them would layer over the tree. I made my life a little bit too difficult with this, but that is what I do. It's my shtick. So I did use Adobe Fresco on my iPad for most of what I can show in layer explanation. I emphasize the importance of light in all of my artworks. I use a lot of layer effects, overlay, burn, screen layers, my favorites. I mean, I have no idea what they do, but I like cycling through them and finding what works. I am going to speed this up so I can actually show you what I am talking about. This is me blocking out the light and the shadow and how everything works, adding my layers, and something a lot of people leave out, you have to tone something if you want to create a depth. I love using a warmer tone when I'm working with cooler colors because it creates a lovely visual contrast. Now, we get to exploring the layers. I wanted to give the entire thing a central focal point that things can change around, because it would be a lot less animation heavy and quite a bit easier just in general for everyone working on it. So let me take all the layers down so we can see what we're working with from the very beginning. Background, the first thing I do is I add my paper texture. When working with watercolor simulation, there are quite a few things to remember. Brush texture matters, and you have to make the paper grain part of the artwork itself. It's not just an afterthought, and remember to dry your layers before adding over and undertones. A lot of information can be conveyed with a single brush stroke, so use your brush angles and pressure settings to your advantage. I think a really good example is what I did here, because if you look closely, these are just swoops. They're swooping strokes and blots of color that I placed very strategically. It's not overcomplicated. I added highlights through clipping layers, and it creates a very aesthetically pleasing result. And, again, toning. So I started from my base sketch, I built out with my back layers, my mid layers, the focal point, the mid-front layer, added some shading. At this point I was like, this looks a little empty, foreground! And now if I actually turn on the sky, you can see the final project. It's a lot of layering, and that is the importance of toning something. I use a warmer color on the outside and a cooler color on the inside, then I set it to divide. And again, I am always advocating play with these layers. They are fun, and they can get you some really interesting effects if you do it right. And by do it right, I mean, I don't know, man. I'm just a rat in a dunce cap and I glued stars on it. I'm pretending to be a wizard out here. I had to be very intentional with this though, because through this process, I needed to keep things a level of consistent so that these could eventually become snowbanks, and these could freeze over, and these layers are all separated so that animation rigs could be planted along each of these to make them sway in the wind, as my favorite compositor, Aiden, did so beautifully for us. I am not a compositor. I will never be a compositor. I will try. The foreground plants were mostly in the style coined by Harriet de Winton. It emphasizes the use of limited brushstrokes to convey the most information and layering subtle colors to create depth and tone. It's a book that I think all artists can learn something in terms of using simplicity to create a very detailed effect. As for symbolism in this artwork, I have no idea. Sometimes I think art should just be beautiful with no airs or unnecessary meanings. I think it should be a lot like our relationship with God. Something simple, beautiful, and familiar, like the changing of the seasons. But I do hope this has given some insight to the process of how a silly rat in a hat draws watercolor flowers. See you all later, have an amazing day, and remember to drink water.